So I want to start by saying you did a really great job. This is an excellent first step and first draft, kind of thinking through what things we want to add for design purposes, what that might look like, where it might go, and so on. One thing I wanted to do was give you a feel for the extent to which we can make edits to their content, because I know it was very different in the courses that you made in your previous job. So it's hard to break out of that, and it's a little uncomfortable, I know, to make decisions that feel like they're not yours. And some clients don't want us to make any changes for legal reasons or for distributor reasons, like our champagne clients. They have to have the wording a certain way, even if it, doesn't fully align with, isn't as easy to understand for their English clients. They need to have it in a certain way. So we didn't do anything to edit their content, even if we really felt like it needed it. But for this one, Rachel is the type where she doesn't have enough time to actually look at this in a critical way, and they're very low staffed. So they haven't actually had anybody come in here and think critically about the way that the text was ordered or the way it was worded. And so what I often find is we might have the text approved before we get to this step, but then as soon as we start making edits to the design in the actual interactive activity or interactive lesson, it uncovers all kinds of things that could be better with the text. And so I wanted to kind of give you a feel for what that means, what it might look like, so that you can feel a little bit more comfortable making those changes. And if there's anything that we're really uncomfortable making a change for, it's never a bad thing to just grab a couple slides and take screenshots of them and then send them to our clients just for approval. And I'll give you some examples of that as well. So I'm going to pop down to this first slide and give you a feel for, I kind of already went through some of this and played around with it. So you're seeing something that probably took me about, I'd say I've spent 30 minutes just kind of thinking through the beginnings of this. And what you'll find is this very first presentation that you do will take you longer than all of the rest of them, because you're basically setting a format that you're going to follow and keep consistent in the other presentations. So that's okay if it takes you longer on this one. So let me kind of give you a feel for what my thought process was going through this in the order in which I did it. The first thing you'll notice is that there's a sentence that, I need this. Okay. First thing you'll notice is that there's some text on this first slide that was originally on the second slide. And and then I haven't done some of the stuff that I'll do during this video. I kind of stopped in my tracks so that I could show you kind of what my thought process was, and doesn't mean that this is final or anything, and it doesn't mean that I'm even going to be 100% happy with it when I send it back to you. It's really just for example purposes of kind of the process that you can go through if it works for you. Okay, so first of all, this sentence right here, the term citizen, and then talking about the Latin root, seemed interesting and very cool. And then I noticed that in the original text that was on that first slide, they went through modern times, and then they narrowed it even more to the United States. And then that next slide went into the ancient Greeks. And so as I noticed that, simply by, or mainly by pulling over the text into this little sidebar that we have for emphasis, I thought, well, it might be kind of cool to go in order. So instead of going Latin root, modern times US, and then back to ancient Greece, I thought, why don't we start with the Latin root, then go to ancient Greece, and then narrow it more to modern times and specifically the United States. So that is the direction I'm heading, and I'm going to go ahead and make some edits, and then I'll send this your way and get some thoughts from you. Okay, so to answer your first question, is this the header for this? Yes, for now. Once we get down to the part, and I think you already did it, but I haven't been down there yet, but when we get down to the part that starts building on this foundation, the citizens ought to consider and blah, 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 that moves into the next level header. Why did the founders think virtue is necessary? So we'll change it up a little bit when we get to that point. Okay, so now that I've moved my text and everything, I need to adjust this little sidebar a bit. This is how I would do that basically. So what I'm doing is I'm referring to the one that I already wrote for modern times because I thought it'd be cool if there were some similarities that we could show, and what are the differences as well. So this starts with a member of a state with rights and responsibilities, a member of the community, and this is only supposed to be a summary since they'll of course read it over on the left as well. Now formatting. There were 3 handwriting fonts that they had, one of which they used in the logo itself. So I really loved these little lines that you put in. I thought they were excellent. So I wanted to keep that theme going, and thought, well, we don't want to use this kind of font for something that if they can't read it, it's going to hurt their ability to succeed in the course. So we definitely couldn't do it, for the main course text. But for something like this, where these are just kind of dividers in a way, and then this as well, we could potentially use those fonts and then make it look a little less boring, a little more playful, and a little more aligned with the logo and the theme that Rachel's wanting to go for in this course versus the BRI kind of strict formatting. So I thought this one's called Just Another Hand, and it is in the main folder, the main BRI Dropbox folder, along with the other ones. So I went ahead and changed it there, and then I noticed that this looked a little bit funny, even if I made that capital. So I thought, wonder if it would look good if it wasn't a complete sentence and it was all uppercase. So I tried that out. I'm not sold on it. You can play around with that. Let me know what you think. And if there's a way to shorten this a little bit too, we can look at that as well. And then, looking at what are the main words in this. And in this case, I would say, participates is important. What's in the other ones? Okay. So you can kind of pick some words that you want to emphasize and then underline those. So maybe it's participates, since that seems to be the emphasis in this particular sentence. And we can change the spacing here if we need to. Okay, so I've got my little definition now, and then I'm going to just read through this. Now we go to Aristotle taught that a citizen is capable of both ruling and being, we can make a space here. I just feel like we could pull that there. Okay, and then we have our picture of Aristotle that you already pulled in here. Oh, the other thing too that I changed, and I put a comment in the next section as well, is the font itself. The other font was a little harder to read. I don't think it was quite as accessible as this one. So I think Libra Franklin is probably going to be the best bet from their fonts that we have to choose from. So I went ahead and changed that here. Now we got to figure out if we're going to have it this way. Do we want to start another slide that starts with Aristotle, or do we want to keep this on the page? And so what I would typically do is just make a copy of this slide, and I would try it out and see what it would look like if I actually made it two separate things. I think you probably had something in mind for this. I'm going to leave it there. I'm guessing you're leaving a space for attribution, which is a good idea. So for now, I'm going to leave this like this. Probably put his name here. I feel like this should be italicized. So that's yet another little thought process. I know it said it on the previous slide, but, and this is even more of a reason to put the Latin part, or the ancient Greece part, right after the definition in Latin. I think I kind of like that just because it gives them a little bit more space to kind of think and focus on these specific points before moving into the next part. Okay, so in this, let's see, in this slide 6 right here, that was originally the first slide, so that's where I started commenting and replying to your comments. So feel free to kind of go through these. I think I've said everything that's in there, basically talking about the title and where that changes. And then the design ideas, we had originally will often change a little bit, like what I was just showing you, where we might even separate the text a little bit more, and now that there's some blank spaces on these pages, we might even move this over and make this a little bit bigger so that it's like half and half. That's something that we can look at. But I'm going to undo that. I'm going to let you kind of play around with it. And get a feel for what it is, how you want it to look in that respect. And then, is there anything I forgot? Oh, and then if you have ideas for how to animate it, we can go ahead and start putting those ideas in here just via comment. Just if you think, for instance, this one, we would only have it roll out one time. And so for animations, of course, it'll take you some time to get comfortable with that. We can have this actually, once this slide comes in, we could have this scroll in like it's being written. And then as the text fades in, we could actually have this roll out. So there's nothing there, and then it reveals itself in gradient fashion, basically from top to bottom. And then the next one, nothing would happen. This would already be there because when they click next, you want them to feel like they're kind of turning a page. And so this would stay the same. This green background and the word citizen would stay the same. The only thing that would happen is that this text and then the image would come in and replace this text and this text. And the same would be true here. This text would replace the picture, and so on and so forth. Okay, so I'm going to delete that because I just changed kind of the way it looked. And you're amazing. Good job. I'll show you some tricks with when we get into quizzing later to kind of dress up your quiz, but right now I think that's fine. Okay, looks like you've got the right idea as far as what to do here. I'm almost tempted to go ahead and make these quote unquote subheaders be at the very top. And I know they're supposed to be level 2. Let me scan through this document. The reason being, what does it mean to be a citizen is the title of the whole presentation. So it doesn't necessarily need to stay up here once we change headers. So my gut's telling me to just go ahead and change this up because we want this to reflect what's being focused on in the text. And I think that looks good. All right, so we can change, you can change the font to the Libra probably through your master. I didn't want to mess with anything. And then for this next section, I absolutely love what you did with this. I think that looks so great, and I love that you're using all of these colors that that they have in their style guide. If it was me doing this, what I would do to kind of snazz it up a little bit and give students a break from kind of the book-like structure that we'll have throughout the whole thing, what I would do is I would come over here and okay, so all of these quotes are associated with this section because we're talking about what did the founders think, why did they think it was necessary? So you have a couple of options. The first option would be to kind of split this screen in such a way that there's still enough room. Let's see if I can do this real quick. So we can rephrase this and say something along the lines of, okay. So then they would click next, and the entire page would be actually taken up by this. So we won't even have the header here. Get rid of that. Doesn't need to take up the whole thing, but remember, once we publish, there'll actually be some padding here in the final iSpring presentation of about probably out to about right here. So if you did, just keep this in mind, if you did take it all the way to the edge like that, there would still be a white frame around it in the final presentation. So what we could do if you want to, and I'll leave this up to you, is pull that out like that and then have our image, which I love the oval. So we'll keep that oval guy. Now this will vary probably from one slide to the next depending on how much text is actually on it. And I loved that you overlapped it a little bit. I think that looks really nice. And I know you need to change that, but we can do that later. Okay, so basically, they'd come to this text that introduces, they click next, and we could add a transition that's sort of like it slides it and it uncovers each of the quotes so that even though this is the way that our reading part should look, it's almost like we're changing it up a little bit to pull in these nice looking quotes before we then go back to the reading type style in the next section. So that's just some thoughts. Everything looks really great. For these quotes, I actually really like this particular font. So that looks really good. I'm not sure if that means that we need to use that same font here. That might actually be a good idea. So I'll let you kind of think through it and get a feel for what works. And as you're going through this and as you're deciding what you think looks best, you could make a list of, for the headers, we want to do this font. For the main text, we want to do this font. If we have a call out and there's a header, it'll be this font, and so on and so forth. And that'll help you kind of moving forward. I think that's about it. Okay, let me know if you have questions.